So this is my 2005 Toyota Tacoma four-wheel drive, single cab, short bed, 5-speed manual transmission. I've had this truck for the last, I don't know, about 4 years. And I ended up hitting a deer with it back in the wintertime. And the deer came in, smoked it right here. It blew out both headlights. The grill exploded. It pushed into the AC condenser. It tore up the bumper cover and this side trim piece here. And I've mostly replaced the parts. I've got new headlights, new grill, new bumper cover. I got most of this straightened out. It been in this this panel here, the panel fitment for the hood, and this quarter panel is not the greatest now, but I'm not real picky about that. However, the main thing is that the AC is no longer working. So I want to get in here. I've got an AC condenser. I have a vacuum pump. I've got Freon. I've got some AC oil, and I have a set of gauges. I've never really worked on an AC system before, although I've done a little reading on it, and I don't think it will be hard at all to pull this condenser out. Then I'll try to charge up the system, see if I can get it working properly. It actually had some issues before I hit this deer, in that when you'd go and you turn it on, if you were basically at anything above idle, the AC wouldn't kick on. It wouldn't actually, I mean, the compressor would turn on, but it wouldn't blow cold until you got down below an idle. Then once you got it blowing cold, it didn't matter how fast you went, it worked all right. So I was going to get in there and fix that eventually, and ever since the deer got into the condenser, I've pretty much been forced into it now. So it's getting warm here. I need AC. I'm going to get it fixed. We'll see what we can get done. I'll get you down here where you can see this condenser. It really didn't get hit too bad, but there's a few spots here where it got into the tubes and started leaking. So anyway, I think what I have to do is I've got to pull this bracket off here, take the horn out. I'll have to unhook this connection down here, and I probably have to loosen the radiator and push it forward just slightly, so that way I can lean this out and pull it out of here without getting into the radiator core itself. My horn also broke the housing, although it still works. It's weak, but it's good enough. Okay, I'll see if I can pull this thing out without damaging the radiator. Okay, it actually went in pretty easy. Okay, I went ahead and got the AC condenser. I pulled it back out and filled it up with the proper amount of system oil. I reinstalled it, at least somewhat temporarily, and I've got my vacuum pump and gauge cluster hooked up here, and I'm going to pull a vacuum on it and see if the system will hold vacuum or if we've got leaks somewhere. So I'll go ahead and so you can see that it's drawing down now, so I'm going to leave it on for a little while and shut it off and come back and see if how quickly it leaks off. Okay folks, I'm back. It's the next day. I did a vacuum decay test last night. It looked like everything was holding up pretty good. Appears that I don't have any major leaks. I've been running the vacuum pump for over an hour now. I'm going to turn it off and start charging the system. So according to the manual, this system calls for 20 to 22 ounces of refrigerant. I've got a couple 12-ounce cans of 134A here. I've got a can tap. Hopefully it doesn't leak. The specs also call for 20 to high 30 pounds on the low side and around 200 pounds of pressure on the high side. So if we've done everything right, hopefully we end up with that pressure after we get both cans added. So I'm going to go ahead and close the high side switch and the low side switch. And of course we're going to charge off the low side. Apologize, my gauge cluster doesn't want to move to the right. We're going to go ahead and charge the first can in upside down as liquid without the AC running. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to see here, but I'm going to go ahead and open the low side valve. There we go. We're at 50 psi right now, charging off this can. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn the system on. Get it to cycle, scavenge the rest of the refrigerant out of this can. Okay, I think this can's empty. Okay, we're going to go for the second can. I made a mistake there. I had the low side valve still open when I unhooked it, so I lost a little bit of pressure. The can's really cold. It's sucking a lot out. Well, fortunately the AC's already blowing cold, so we're getting somewhere. That's what we want to see. We're at about 30 psi on the low side. We're approaching 200 on the high side. It's still pulling from this can. It gets cold every time it cycles. We're approaching 200. Trying to warm this can up, speed things up a little faster. We're at 25 and basically 200, so we should be right on the money by the time this can's empty. Okay, now I'm going to close the high side switch on the actual system. All the valves are closed on the gauge cluster. We'll close this valve. So this is now isolated from the AC system. I'm going to go up here and open the valve so I can pressurize all this refrigerant that's still in this line. I'm going to pressurize over to this yellow line and also keep it in the red line. Okay, so these two, I'm going to have the low side pull the rest of this refrigerant out of these two lines. There, you can see it jumping up. Okay, I think I'm done now. I'm going to unhook this can. I've got all the valves on the gauge cluster closed. I'll reopen my high side valve down here just to double check the pressures. Okay, with everything running a full load on the AC, we're at 25 and 200. I think that's just about right. We're a little over 200 and slightly over 25 now, so that's right on spec for what the service manual is calling for. Well, there you have it. That was my first time ever doing an AC system like this. There was a couple of mistakes I made. One of the videos I was watching beforehand, they actually had a check valve in their fill or vacuum line here. Mine doesn't. I made the mistake of accidentally pulling it off with the low side slightly open, and some of the pressure was coming out, so I quickly turned the low side back closed, and you just lose what residual pressure is in this line. And then, when I went to purge the high side line and the yellow side line, again, since I didn't have a check valve, I had to re-hook this back up to a can so this was not leaking to the atmosphere. Then when I went and opened this valve, I had the valve on the high side of the actual AC system closed. I opened this valve. It then connects the high side and the fill side over to the low side when this valve gets open, and that draws all that refrigerant that's in these two lines back into the system, so you lose the least amount as possible. So all in all, I think it worked out pretty good. It was a bit of a learning experience, but seems to be blowing cold. If there's any more issues I come across after running it for a while, I'll check back in and do a follow-up on what the problem was. But we did that decay test with the vacuum pump. It seemed to be holding strong, so I think this new condenser is going to work. Alright, so now that the AC system's working, I'm going to try to get all this, the grill and covers and the horn brackets all buttoned back up, and we'll start driving it and see how long it lasts. Apologize for the bad lighting. I don't have enough room in my garage to pull this thing in at the moment, so I have to work on it out here. There we go. Well, there you have it, folks. Again, this is my first time. There were some lessons that I learned. I think the key takeaway is that Suck out your high side after you're done either filling or testing, and you'll save a lot of refrigerant, because I made that mistake where I went to unhook and the high side still had pressure on it, and you've got a lot of refrigerant in the system. So if you close it off at the AC line and then open your low side valve, and the lower pressure on the low side will suck a lot of that refrigerant out, so you waste a lot less. So I'll go ahead and fire this up. We'll do a test on it here and see how quickly it starts blowing cold. Like I said, before I hit that deer, the problem was that if you were idling and you went and flipped the AC on, it would work. But anything above idle, you couldn't get it to kick on. So I could be, I could stop at a rest stop, get back on the interstate, forget to turn it on, try to turn it on the interstate, it would just blow warm. I would try to go find a big hill, speed way up, push in the clutch, coast down the hill, turn it on. Hopefully I could coast long enough that would end up working again. And I used to do that when I was driving back and forth to school sometimes, when I'd forget. So hopefully that's fixed now. I don't have to worry about that anymore. So, let's see what we got. Turn AC on. Compressor clutch just kicked on. I'm revving it up. Yeah, it's blowing cold. It's getting colder. Yeah, that's just right. So I'd say that's a fix. Hopefully, like I said, we don't have any leaks. We did that decay test. Didn't seem to be anything major. If there is something, I'll check back in here in a few weeks or whenever I develop another problem and go over what the issue was and then try to solve it. But I think we got enough refrigerant in the system. That was 24 ounces in those 2 cans from the bit I lost. I probably had 20 ounces in it, which is what the system calls for. So anyway, first time on the AC system on the vehicle. I think it was a success. So I was just looking at this condenser here, trying to see where the leak might have been, and there are some of the tubes that are damaged here. You can see that one's been pushed in, that tube's been pushed in. That's mostly just damage to the fins. So it looks like it was likely that one of these tubes got pierced and allowed all the refrigerant out. However, I don't see a major wet spot on here where refrigerant and oil came out, but I don't think my system had a whole lot of refrigerant in it anyway, the way it was acting up. So there may not have been a whole lot to come out. I'm not sure, but it definitely was empty after I hit that deer. Anyway, thanks for watching.